My son stood up at the head of his own table, lifted his glass, and told a room full of people that I was ruined. 3 years, he said. 3 years, and he still won't admit it's gone. Somebody in this family has to be the grown-up about Dad's money. The candles were lit, the good plates were out. Two neighbor couples sat with their forks halfway up, not sure yet whether this was a joke. Reed smiled the way he smiles when he wants the room on his side. My daughter-in-law looked at her lap. My granddaughter was under the table, counting everyone's shoes. I kept my hands folded on the cloth. I did not say anything. That is the thing people never understood about me. My quiet was never weakness. It was a decision I made new every single day. Across the table, my daughter Lauren had gone still. She had been quiet all evening, quieter than a hospice nurse gets even after a hard week. She was looking down at her phone. Then she set it face up on the tablecloth, slow, careful, like it might break. And she looked at me, not at her brother, at me. "Dad," she said, "is this real?" The room held its breath. My son had just told everyone I was broke. My daughter was looking at her phone like the floor had moved under her chair. And every person at that table was about to learn something about the quiet old man at the end of it. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. You have to know who was really sitting at that table before you can understand what happened next. My name is Clyde Sattler. I am 68 years old, retired, a widower, going on 4 years now. I live in Ferris, in the southern part of Indiana, in the same brick house my wife Edith and I bought when Nixon was still president, and I still had all my hair. For 33 years, I put heat in half the houses in this county and cool air in the other half. Sattler Heating and Cooling. I started it out of a one-truck garage in 1983 with $400 and a set of gauges. Edith kept the books at the kitchen table with a mechanical pencil and a coffee ring on every page. I am telling you the plain parts first because the plain parts are true, and because my family had spent 3 years forgetting them. The town sees a quiet old man with a green pickup and a beagle named Rooster. They see me at the diner every Thursday at 7 with black coffee in the same booth. They see the flannel and the work boots and the hands, and they think that is all there is. I prefer it that way. I always have. But let me tell you about the hands, since my son had a lot to say about them being useless. They are 68 years old and they still work. I can still lift a compressor off a tailgate. I can still read a wiring diagram in the dark. Last spring, I carried a full condensing unit up my neighbor's basement stairs when the young fellow he hired stood there breathing hard. What got smaller these past few years was not me. It was the way my own children looked at me, and that is a different kind of shrinking. Edith would have hated all of this. She had a way of seeing straight through a lie to the frightened thing hiding behind it. When she was alive, our kids did not talk to me the way they did that Christmas. She kept us all honest just by being in the room. She has been gone since the winter of 2021. Cancer. It took her slow and then all at once, the way it does. After the funeral, I stopped explaining myself to my children. I do not fully know why. Grief makes a man go quiet, and I let mine make me quieter than was wise. So let me explain myself to you instead. Let me tell you what my son did not know. Back in the beginning, Edith and I made a deal at that kitchen table. Every quarter, no matter how lean, we set money aside. First, it was $10 a week in a coffee can. Then it was a passbook. Then it was mutual funds, bought a little at a time, held for decades, never touched. Edith wrote every number down in her round hand. "Write it down, Clyde," she used to say. "Not so you can hold it over anybody, so you never have to argue about it." By the time I sold Sattler Heating and Cooling in 2016, that patient little habit had grown into something my kids would not have believed if I had told them. I did not tell them. The sale money and the savings went into a trust I set up in Edith's name, the Edith Sattler Revocable Living Trust. I am the sole trustee. Our children and grandchildren are the ones it is meant for someday when I am done needing it. I never wanted them to grow up waiting on a number. Edith and I agreed on that too. So we lived in the same brick house, drove the same trucks, and kept our mouths shut. The neighbors thought we were careful. We were more than careful. We were quiet on purpose. I want you to see those years, because my son never did. The first winter I had the company, I worked 100 hours some weeks. I crawled through attics in July with the insulation itching down my collar. I lay on my back on cold basement floors in January with a drop light in my teeth. When a furnace died on Christmas Eve, and one always did, I was the man who put his boots back on and drove out through the snow, so a family with a baby would have heat by morning. I never once charged holiday rates for that. Edith would not have let me, and I would not have wanted to. She rode with me some nights when the kids were old enough to leave. She would sit in the truck with a thermos and the radio low while I worked, and on the way home we would talk about the future, like it was a thing we were building with our hands, because it was. "We are not going to be rich, Clyde," she said once, watching the snow come down through the windshield. "But our kids are never going to lie awake scared about money. That is a kind of rich most people never get." She was right. She was almost always right. And the terrible joke of it is that the son we did all of it for is the one who ended up lying awake scared about money anyway, and could not bring himself to tell us why. Now here is the part that aches. For years, I was the reason my son thought the world was kind to him. In 2010, Reed found a house he loved and could not afford. Edith and I wired him the down payment and called it a gift, because it was one. I wrote a letter for the file and never mentioned it again. Reed thought the seller had come down on the price. The seller had come down on nothing. The seller had come down on me. Then his landscaping company hit two bad winters, 2019 and 2020. His crew was about to lose their jobs before Christmas both years. Quietly, through a small loan he thought came from his bank, I covered his payroll so those men kept working. Some of it he paid back. Most of it I forgave and never said so. I wrote all of it down the way Edith taught me, not to hold it over him, so I would never have to argue about it. He thought the bank had been generous with him. The bank had been me. I tell you this not to make myself sound like a saint. I made mistakes too. The biggest one was letting a proud man believe he had done it all alone. Pride you never test tends to rot. I know that now. I did not know it then. So when my company sold and my wife died and I went quiet, my son looked at the quiet and drew the wrong conclusion. He decided the old man must have nothing left. And a little later, when his own world started to come apart, he decided the old man must not be allowed to fumble away whatever was. That is where the trouble started. Not at the Christmas table. Long before it. At 100 small dinners where I said nothing and let him think he knew me. Let me take you through it the way it happened. The first cut I remember clearly was a Sunday dinner in the autumn of 2024. Reed's business had been quiet all year in a way that scared him, though he would not say so. We were at his house. Renee had made a pot roast. I mentioned that I was thinking of putting a new roof on the brick house in the spring. Reed set down his fork. "Let me handle that, Dad," he said. "You don't need to worry about numbers anymore. Getting bids, comparing quotes, it confuses you. I'll take care of it." Confuses me. I priced ductwork for 33 years, but I let it stand. I looked at Renee, and Renee looked at the pot roast, and I let it stand. That is the trap the quiet man builds for himself. Every time you let a small thing pass, you are teaching the other person that the next thing will pass too. There were other cuts, small ones. They are always small ones. That is how they get under the door. A week or two later, I ran into Reed at the hardware store on the square, where I have bought fittings and fasteners for 50 years. I was at the counter buying a new thermostat for a widow down my street. No charge, just being neighborly. Reed saw me counting out bills and he came over and put his hand on my shoulder, gentle, in front of Dwight, who has run that register since he was a boy. "Dad," he said, loud enough for Dwight to hear, "you don't need to be spending money on other people right now. We talked about this." We had not talked about anything, but Dwight looked away, embarrassed for me, and I felt the heat crawl up my neck. Not anger, shame. The shame a good man feels when someone he loves makes him look small in a place where he has always stood tall. I paid for the thermostat. I installed it that afternoon for the widow, and I did not tell my son because it was none of his business, and because I was learning slowly that some things you protect by keeping them quiet. But I remembered it. I remember all of them. That is the other thing about the quiet man. He is not asleep. He is taking notes. The calls started around then. I did not hear them, but I felt them. The tone at family gatherings had shifted. Reed would answer questions the doctor or the neighbor asked me, as if I were slow to find the words. He started saying "we" about my life. We should think about downsizing Dad. We should get Dad's finances organized. We. And never once did the "we" include me. My daughter Lauren was not part of it. I want that clear. Lauren is 42, a hospice nurse, and she has spent her working life sitting with people in the last rooms of their lives. She knows the difference between a man who is failing and a man who is merely tired of proving he is not. But she is gentle by trade, and at first she thought her brother was just being anxious. Anxiety looks a lot like caring if you are standing far enough away. I had one friend who would not look away. Cyril Farrow. Retired sheet metal man, 70 years old, hands like a pair of tin snips. We take the same booth at the diner some Thursdays. One morning he watched me stir my coffee for too long and put it to me straight. "Clyde," he said, "why do you let your own boy talk to you like the help?" I did not have a good answer, so I gave him the honest one. "Because I still think he's just scared," I said. Cyril snorted. "Scared men take the last life raft. They don't build one for you first." He was more right than I wanted him to be. But I was not ready yet to believe my son was building anything but a bad habit. For a while, I was right about the fear and wrong about everything else. "You know what your trouble is," Cyril said, pointing his fork at me across the booth. "You spent your whole life fixing things quiet. Nobody sees the man who keeps the heat on. They only notice when it goes cold. You got used to nobody noticing. Now your own boy has decided your furniture, and you're too polite to tell him a chair can't hold a family up." "A chair does hold the family up," I said. "You just don't look at it while it does." Cyril shook his head and drank his coffee. "That's a nice line, Clyde. Your wife would have liked it, but a nice line won't stop a man who's already made up his mind that you're done." I did not answer him. I looked out the diner window at the town, at the streetlights just coming on, and I thought about Edith and about how tired I was of being underestimated by the very people I had spent my life protecting. Tired is a dangerous word. Tired is when a man either gives up or finally stands up. I did not know yet which one I was going to do. Then came the packet. It arrived in November in a stiff envelope with a note in Reed's handwriting clipped to the front. "Dad, this just makes things easier for everybody. No rush. We can sign at the holidays." Inside was a durable power of attorney naming Reed as my agent, and a second set of papers, a request to change the successor trustee of Edith's trust, so that if I were ever declared unable, Reed would step in. I read those papers the way I used to read a wiring diagram, slow, line by line, following each wire to where it went. They went to one place, to me out of the picture, and my son holding the pen. It was not a rude son anymore. It was a plan, typed, notarized, and pointed at me like a tool at a job. I did not shout. I did not call him. I sat at my kitchen table with Edith's yellow mixing bowl on the shelf above me, the one she used for every batch of Christmas cookies for 40 years, and I felt the cold come over me. Not anger, clarity, the kind of quiet that comes right before you finally understand a problem you have been circling for months. A week later, Lauren came by after a shift, still in her scrubs, and sat at my table and did not touch the coffee I poured her. She turned her cup in a slow circle. "Dad," she said, "Reed left me a voicemail. I can't stop thinking about it. I didn't delete it." "What did he say?" She looked at me, and there were tears standing in her eyes, but she held them there. She has practice holding things. "He said we have to get ahead of it before you blow through what's left," she said. "He said you're not going to admit anything's wrong, so we have to make the decisions for you." He said it fast, like he'd already decided. She swallowed. "Dad, what's left?" That was the moment. That was when I stopped giving my son the benefit of the doubt and started giving him the truth. In order, on paper, the way Edith taught me. "Lauren," I said, "there is a great deal left, and none of it is what your brother thinks it is. I need you to trust me for a few weeks, and I need you to keep that voicemail." She nodded slowly. She did not ask for numbers. That is the difference between my two children, if you want it in one sentence. One of them was counting my money. The other one just wanted to know I was all right. The next morning, I called Vera Trowick. Vera was Edith's friend before she was my attorney. She has an office above the old hardware store on the square, with a window that looks down on the Christmas lights the town strings every year. She is 71 and does not suffer nonsense, mine included. I laid the packet on her desk. She read it once, then again, and set it down. "Did you sign anything?" she asked. "No." "Good. Then this is just paper somebody wants you to sign. It has no power over you, Clyde. None. Not until your hand touches a pen. Do you understand that?" "I understand it." "Then here is what you do not do," she said. "You do not confront him. You do not call him a thief at Thanksgiving. Arguments are just opinions bouncing around a room. Give me a week and I will give you facts instead." She leaned back and looked at me the way Edith used to. "Let the record do the work," she said. "The cleanest thing you can do is make Lauren your successor trustee and your healthcare proxy and give her a way to see the trust for herself. Then the truth is already in the room before your son ever swings at you. He will swing at empty air, and everyone will watch him do it." I sat there in the chair Edith used to sit in when the two of them planned things over tea, and for a moment I could almost hear my wife in the room. She had a saying near the end when she knew she was leaving me alone with two grown children and a lifetime of quiet decisions. "Do not make them guess who you are, Clyde," she told me. "You have spent your life letting people underestimate you because it was easier than bragging. But someday one of them is going to mistake your kindness for a soft head, and on that day, you are going to have to show them the whole man at once. Do not flinch when it comes." I had flinched for 3 years. I had told myself that patience was the same as strength. Sitting in Vera's office, I finally understood that patience without a spine is just a slow way of teaching people they can walk on you. "All right," I told Vera. "Draw it up, all of it, and when the time comes, I will show them the whole man at once." I sat with that on the drive home. Out in the truck afterward, Cyril was waiting to give me a ride to pick up my own truck from the shop. He wanted to change the locks on the whole family. "Cut them all off," he said. "Every one of them but Lauren. Let them find out what broke really feels like." "That is not the door I want to close," I told him. "Edith used to say the loudest man in the room usually has the weakest hand. I would rather be quiet and hold a strong one." Cyril grumbled, but he drove me, and he did not argue. That is what a real friend is. Somebody who tells you the hard thing once and then helps you do it your way. Let the facts do the work. So I let them. Over the next 3 weeks, I did the quiet work. Not schemes, documents. I sat with Vera, and we named Lauren's successor trustee and healthcare proxy, all of it clean, all of it recorded. I brought Vera the shoebox from under Edith's yellow bowl. Inside it was everything. The 2010 gift letter for Reed's down payment, the forgiven payroll loans with the dates and the amounts, the quarterly statements going back further than my son had been alive, Edith's round handwriting on half of it. Vera turned the pages slowly. "He has no idea," she said. It was not a question. "He has no idea," I said. "And you carried him this whole time." "He is my son," I said. That was the only answer I had, then or now. Vera set up a login so Lauren could see the trust for herself, and she held it to send at the right moment, so it would not get lost in the noise of the holidays. Everything was ready. Everything was true. All it needed was a room. Meanwhile, my son was as sure as a man can be that the old man was finished. I know now, from what came later, what he told Renee in those weeks. He told her the power of attorney just needs Dad's signature over the holidays. He told her it was a formality, a kindness, the responsible thing. He told her, and I heard this in his own voice not long after, he'll sign at Christmas. He signs whatever I put in front of him. He was right about one thing. I would be at Christmas. He was wrong about the pen. Christmas Day came cold and bright. Reed hosts now. He likes hosting. He likes the good plates and the head of the table and the room arranged so that he is the center of it. I understand that about him. He got it honest in a way. I like being the man who fixed the furnace when nobody else could. We all want to be the one the room needs. His way of wanting it just cost more than mine ever did. I brought a poinsettia and a tin of the cookies I still make from Edith's recipe in Edith's yellow bowl, because some habits are how you keep a person with you. I set the tin on the counter. Renee thanked me and did not quite meet my eyes. Gracie, my granddaughter, who was 7 and afraid of nothing, hugged my leg and then crawled under the table to count shoes. Lauren arrived last, still half in work mode, her phone in her hand. She caught my eye across the room and I gave her the smallest nod. She had gotten Vera's message that afternoon. She had seen the trust. She had seen the gift letters. She had seen her own children named in it. She knew now, before anyone else in that house, exactly who her father was. She did not say a word. She just watched her brother the way you watch a pot that is about to boil over. Dinner was fine for a while. Ham and the potatoes Renee's mother taught her to make. The two neighbor couples talked about the ice on the roads. Reed poured wine and told a story about a client that made him look generous. Under the table, Gracie announced there were 14 shoes and 1 slipper. Then Reed stood up. He does not like a quiet room for long. He tapped his glass with his ring, and the table turned to him. He said some kind things first, about family, about the year, warming the room up. And then he did the thing he had clearly been planning to do, the thing that would set the table up for the papers he had in a folder in the other room. He gestured at me with his glass, gentle, sorrowful, like a man carrying a heavy load. "And I want to say something about Dad," he said, "because we all love him. And loving someone means being honest. Dad worked hard his whole life. But the truth is, these last few years have been rough. Real rough. He ran himself broke and he won't admit it, and it's on us now to take care of him whether he likes it or not." He looked around, collecting the sympathy. 3 years, he said. 3 years, and he still won't admit it's gone. Somebody in this family has to be the grown-up about Dad's money. The neighbors' polite smiles wavered. One of them looked at me to see how I would take it. I let him talk. That was the thing about my kids. They never asked. Reed had never once, in 3 years, asked me a single real question about my life. He had only made announcements about it, so I let him make one more. Across the table, Lauren picked up her phone. She looked at it, and then she set it down, face up, on the white cloth, and she looked at me, not at her brother. "Dad," she said, "is this real?" The room went quiet. "Is what real, honey?" I asked, though I already knew. She turned the phone so I could see it, though only I was close enough to read it. It was the trust. Edith's name at the top, the number underneath. The gift letters scanned in behind it, her own children listed as beneficiaries. "This," she said, and her voice shook, not with fear, with something closer to awe. "All of it. You. Is this real?" I nodded once. "It is real." Reed laughed, a short, confused sound. "Lauren, put your phone away. What are you doing? We're in the middle of—" "No," she said. She did not raise her voice. She has sat with too many dying people to be afraid of a hard moment at a dinner table. "No, Reed, we're not in the middle of anything anymore." And then my daughter did the bravest thing I have ever seen her do. "There's something you all should hear," she said to the table. "Reed left this on my phone 6 weeks ago. I've listened to it about 100 times, trying to find a way it doesn't mean what it means. I couldn't find one." "Lauren," Reed said. His face had changed. "Don't." She pressed the screen. His own voice came out of the little speaker and filled that decorated room. Tinny but unmistakable. His voice fast and low, the voice of a man who thought no one but his sister would ever hear it. "Look, we have to get ahead of this before he blows through what's left. He's not going to admit anything's wrong, so we make the decisions for him. I've got the POA drawn up and the trustee change. We get him to sign at Christmas when everybody's around and he doesn't want a scene. Once I'm trustee, it's handled. He'll never even know what's in there." The message ended. The little chime played, absurd and cheerful, in the silence. No shouting, no security guard, no dramatic ending. Just my son's own voice, telling a table full of witnesses exactly what he thought of me and exactly what he had planned. The neighbors were staring at their plates. Renee had both hands over her mouth. Gracie had gone still under the table, sensing the weather change the way small children do. Reed stood there with his glass still in his hand. I set my hands flat on the cloth. Then I did the only thing left to do. I told the truth, plainly once, so it could never be untold. "I am not broke," I said. My voice was steady. It surprised even me how steady. I never was. I sold my company in 2016 for more than any of you would guess, and I had already saved for 30 years before that. It is all in your mother's trust, safe, for your children. I looked at Reed. The down payment on your house did not come from the seller, son. It came from me. The 2 winners your crew kept their jobs, that was not your bank. That was me. I have the letters. I have every number your mother and I ever wrote down in a shoebox at home, and I did not write them down to hold over you. I wrote them down so I would never have to argue with anyone about them. The clock on Reed's wall ticked into the silence. "I was never going to let you fall, son," I said. "I only needed you to stop pushing me down while I was holding you up." Reed sat down. Not gracefully. He sat down like a man whose legs had quietly quit on him. The glass went to the table. He stared at the cloth in front of him, and I watched 3 years of a story he had told himself come apart in about 4 seconds. The neighbors made their quiet excuses and gathered their coats. That is the mercy of neighbors. They know when a family needs the room. Lauren took Gracie into the kitchen for cocoa, murmuring the calm things she says to frighten people for a living. Renee sat with her hands still over her mouth, and when she took them away, she looked at her husband like she was seeing a stranger she had been married to for years. It was just Reed and me and the wreck of the good plates. He put his face in his hands, then took it out again, because I had raised him to at least face a thing. When he spoke, his voice was nothing like the voice on that phone. "The business is gone, Dad," he said. "It's been gone for over a year. I owe more than the house is worth. I've been moving money around to hide it from Renee, from everybody. And when I looked at you, quiet, not spending anything, I told myself you must have a pile of it somewhere, and you were too far gone to use it right." He shook his head. "I didn't know how to tell you I failed, so I told everyone you did." There it was, the frightened thing behind the lie. Cyril had been right about that much all along. I did not feel triumphant. I want you to know that. There is nothing to win when your child breaks in front of you. I felt tired and I felt sad. And underneath both of those, I felt the old, stubborn love that does not ask permission. But love without a spine is just permission for more of the same. Edith taught me that too, though she said it kinder. "Here is how it is going to be," I told him. "Your sister stays trustee. Nothing gets signed over to you. Not now, maybe not ever. The power of attorney goes in the fireplace tonight." He nodded. He had expected worse, and there was more. "I am not going to the police, and I'm not going to ruin you," I said. "You are my son, and I do not do that to my son, even the version of him that made that phone call. But a door back to me is not the same as a key to the safe. If you want your way back, it runs through the truth and through time. Not through my money and not through my signature. You tell Renee everything tonight. You get real help for the debt and for whatever made you willing to do this. And you earn back the trust one honest day at a time, the slow way, the only way there is." He was quiet a long moment. "The door isn't locked," I said, "but it only opens from your side now, and it opens slow. Justice and mercy use the same 2 hands. The whole trick, the only trick, is knowing when to open them." I want to tell you what happened after, because the after is the part that matters most, and it is the part my family had been rushing past for 3 years. The reckoning took an evening. The healing took a year. That night, Reed told Renee everything. All of it. The debt and the hiding and the phone call. I know because Renee called me the next morning, early, and said only, "Thank you for not letting him get away with it, and thank you for not destroying him." I didn't know it was possible to do both. I said neither did he. That was the lesson. Winter passed slowly, the way it does after a hard thing. Reed did not do what I feared, which was to disappear in shame or to come back sweet and empty, looking for a shortcut. He did the harder thing. He got a salaried job with a mechanical contractor 2 towns over, a good outfit, honest work, a steady check. He sat down with a credit counselor and made a plan for the debt that would take years, and did not touch a cent of mine. He started seeing someone about the part of him that had been willing to trade his father's dignity for a signature. And without anyone asking him to, he started paying me back. The first envelope showed up in March. He had let himself into the brick house while I was at the diner and left it under Edith's yellow bowl, where he must have somehow known I would find it, though I never told him that is where I keep things that matter. Inside was $200 and a note in his handwriting. 2 words. On account. There was another in April, another in May. Never a big amount. Always on time. Always under the bowl. He never mentioned them out loud, and neither did I, because some conversations are better held in envelopes than in words. I asked Cyril about it one Thursday at the diner. I told him about the envelopes, the 2 words, the way my son let himself in and left them where a man leaves the things he cannot yet say. Cyril, who had wanted me to change every lock in the family, chewed on that for a while. Huh, he finally said. Well, I'll be. You didn't lock the door, and he's the one crawling back through it on his hands and knees, paying for the privilege. 200 at a time. He pointed his fork at me again, but softer this time. I was wrong, Clyde. You keep the locks the way they are. I intend to, I said. Coming from Cyril Farrow, that was practically a hymn. I have known the man 40 years, and I could count on one hand the times he has admitted he was wrong. That he did it over the son he had told me to cut off tells you the year had changed more than one stubborn old man. I heard later from Renee what those envelopes cost my son. He was not a wealthy man anymore. $200 was a real sacrifice. Some months, he gave up things to do it. He drove an old truck now, worse than mine, and he did not complain about it, at least not where I could hear. A man's true apology is not the words he says. It is the comforts he gives up without being asked, quietly, month after month, when he thinks no one is keeping score. I was keeping score. I have always kept score. But this time, I was rooting for him. Lauren became the steady center of the family, which is where she always belonged. As trustee, she came by on Sunday afternoons and sat at the kitchen table where her mother once kept the books. And I taught her how Edith and I had built the thing, one patient quarter at a time. She was quiet for a long while over the old statements. You carried all of us, she finally said. You carried every one of us, and you let us think you were the one who needed carrying. That was my mistake, I told her. Not the carrying, the letting you think it. A man should let the people he loves know he is strong. Not so, they will thank him. So they will not be afraid for him, and so they will not mistake his quiet for weakness. She reached across the table and put her hand on my old, weathered hand, the one my son had called useless, and she did not say anything else. She did not have to. Gracie, who is 7 and afraid of nothing, decided that summer that she and I were going to rebuild her grandmother's flower bed along the south wall of the brick house. So we did. She pulled weeds and I turned soil, and she asked me 100 questions, real ones, the kind nobody in my family had asked me in years. Why is the dirt darker here? How does the furnace know when to come on? Did Grandma Edith really use that yellow bowl for the cookies? Yes, I told her. That very one. She looked at the bowl on the shelf with new respect after that. Autumn came. Reed and I began to talk again, carefully, the way you test a repair before you trust your weight on it. First it was practical things. Then it was real things. One evening he asked me out of nowhere how I had learned to stay so calm the night of the phone call, and I told him the truth, that I had not been calm, that I had only been quiet, and that there is a difference, and that the difference is a choice you make one breath at a time. He called me one Saturday in October, and I could hear a job site behind him, compressors and men, and a radio. He had a question about a heat pump that would not hold a charge, a real question, from a working man to another working man. I walked him through it over the phone the way I would have walked a young apprentice through it 40 years ago. When we hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a while, holding the quiet, because it was the first time in longer than I could remember that my son had called me to ask what I knew instead of to tell me what I had lost. That is a small thing. I know it is a small thing, but healing is made of small things, stacked up patient over months, the same way Edith and I built the trust one quarter at a time. Nobody heals in a single grand gesture at a dinner table. The dinner table is only where the truth comes out. What you do with the truth after everyone has gone home, that is the real work. And it is slow, and it is quiet, and almost nobody claps for it. By December, I could see that the man leaving those envelopes was not the man who had made that call. That is the only proof of change that ever counts. Not the apology. The 1,000 quiet days after it. The second Christmas I hosted. It was a smaller table. My house, not his. Lauren and Gracie, Renee and Reed, Cyril Farrow, because a man like that should never eat Christmas dinner alone, and because I wanted him to see the door he had told me to lock, standing open, and to see that I had been right to keep it that way. Reed came to the door last. He knocked, though it was his father's house and he could have walked in. He knocked and he waited, and when I opened it, he was standing there with his hands empty at his sides. "Can I come in, Dad?" he said. "I brought nothing but myself this time. I figured that's the only thing you ever actually wanted from me anyway." I stood back and held the door. "That is the only thing," I said. "Come in out of the cold." We ate at my table. I made the cookies in Edith's yellow bowl, and at the end of the meal, Gracie carried it out to the middle of the table like it was the finest thing in the house and set it down among us like it belonged there. It did. It always had. Now let me talk to you for a moment, whoever you are, wherever you are hearing this tonight. If you have ever been called a burden by someone you were quietly holding up, if you have ever sat at a table and let a person you love tell a room the wrong story about you because making a scene felt worse than being misunderstood, if you have ever chosen to stay strong and stay kind when it would have been so much easier to be loud, then you already understand everything this old man learned the hard way. Your quiet is not weakness, but do not let it become a wall between you and the people who love you. Let them know you are strong. Let them know it before they mistake your silence for surrender. If this story meant something to you tonight, I hope you will share it with someone who may need to hear it. And tell me in the comments about the person who quietly carried you, the one you maybe never fully thanked. Thank them if you still can. Thank you for spending this time with me. And remember, no matter your age, no matter how the year has treated you, it is never too late to answer contempt with patience, pride with grace, and fear with love. The end.